I'm a big believer in not reinventing the wheel, right? Like, I don't think you need to come up with the concept yourself and where you need to suddenly think, right, the only way that I'm going to change the world is by coming up with something that doesn't exist. That's actually really hard to do. Most things, by the way, have been done before in some capacity. What you need to do, or at least my view, is just to do something better than someone else.
You're listening to Not My First Guess. I'm Hattie Willis, your host, and each episode I talk to an entrepreneur, investor, or startup expert to unpack their hardest moments, biggest wins, and hard-earned advice so we can shortcut our learnings as founders together. Today, I'm joined by serial founder Sach Kukadia. Sach is one of those founders who has stories of his entrepreneurial tendencies ranging back to his school days. Though, unlike most tales, Sach actually got excluded for his entrepreneurial endeavours. He didn't let it slow his stride or break his rebellious streak though, and went on to found a pirate radio station at university. On leaving uni, he launched his first official startup at just 22, Secret Sales, with his brother Nish. Over the next decade, they grew the business up, turned down a lucrative deal with Groupon, but ended up having to sell in 2016 due to investor pressure. Alongside losing relationships with the staff they had to fire after the merger, the company lost millions in value, to the point where Sach and Nish bought the business back to attempt to rebuild their legacy. Having built the valuation back up, they were able to make what Sach calls an elegant dismount a year later, though both founders were by this point totally burnt out. Sach's entrepreneurial journey isn't over yet though. He's recently launched his latest venture, 7879, which within months of launching was a best-selling brand in Selfridges' latest concept event, and on track for a £1.5 million run rate for the year. In this episode, Sach shares lessons from Secret Sales, including finding his own voice after a member of the board told him to not speak until spoken to, having to buy eBay off their board, the emotional cost of selling to the wrong buyer, why he's excited about his latest venture 7879, and how they're testing the core risks as they execute. And finally, how you can take a data-driven approach to jewellery design. Without further ado, let's start the show. First and foremost, welcome, Sach. Thank you so much for joining the show.
Thanks, Hattie. Thank you for having me.
I want to dive straight in. There's a lot to cover because you've had several startups, and also the journey starts even before your first startup, which you started at 22. So you talk about your entrepreneurship journey starting when you're at school and actually starting with something you got expelled for. So can you tell us a little more about your kind of first experiences of entrepreneurship, how you got started, why you got started?
Sure. For me, it was always quite natural. There are these courses that take place nowadays at various universities which try to teach people to be an entrepreneur, and I understand the value that can have. But for me personally, it was ingrained from a very young age, and it was very natural. So when I was young, my father would always say, and since the beginning of times, I could always remember him telling me that I should always work for myself and I should always think about starting a business. And I think that stems from, both of my parents are from Kenya, both of which they weren't particularly affluent. My grandparents moved from India to Kenya to give my parents a better life. My parents then came over to the UK at a very young age, like my father in his teens by himself, not really knowing how to maneuver or what to do, but just had to figure it out. And back in, those days, it was hard, right? For an immigrant to come in and to get a job and to do anything like that was really challenging. And it forced a lot of the people that immigrated into the UK around the 60s and 70s, it forced them down the road of entrepreneurship because getting a decent job with decent pay was almost impossible. And so I think it started there. And my father had a good amount of success, and my mother too. And off the back of that, we're ingraining in me and my siblings this view that we should always work for ourselves. Not that there's anything wrong to work for other people, but that was just their view. But even putting that to one side and thinking about personality traits and individual characteristics of people who want to start businesses. Like when I was young, I was always doing things that I shouldn't really be doing. And I was always trying to make money or do things that were correlating with that. Even though my parents gave me everything I wanted, I was still trying to be, I don't know, like I was selling newspapers at school at 9 years old, which is to your point, what I had a problem with at school. And it wasn't that selling newspapers was wrong, right? It's just that they had topless models on the center page. And the public school I went to frowned upon the fact that I was selling these newspapers and for whatever reason decided to exclude me. And my father wasn't upset by that. He actually thought that was great because it showed a bit of entrepreneurship. But my mother obviously wasn't particularly happy. And then as the years progressed into teenage years, you end up doing things that you don't necessarily or you shouldn't be doing. And I was involved, actually, believe it or not, I was running a pirate radio station many years ago. But again, it was because opportunistically there was a way to make money in mid-teens, and that actually was quite good for me and opened up a lot of skills and experiences that I think helped me later in life. But a lot of it was driven just very naturally. It wasn't like, oh, you should do this or you should do that. It was always just, it just felt like that's what I wanted to do. And I never thought about good or bad. I just thought, well, let's just do it. It's going to make money. And I'm a big believer in not reinventing the wheel, right? Like, I don't think you need to come up with the concept yourself and where you need to suddenly think, right, the only way that I'm going to change the world is by coming up with something that doesn't exist. That's actually really hard to do. Most things, by the way, have been done before in some capacity. What you need to do, or at least my view, is just to do something better than someone else. And so all of the businesses that I've started exist in some form or another. And myself and my brother, and now with this new business with my co-founder, have introduced concepts to the UK very early, knowing that they don't exist here. Now, there's obviously risks to that, but there is less risk to that than there is starting something from scratch where you have no idea whether it's going to work or not. We've got, in these both circumstances that I'm involved in, there were proven case histories and models that demonstrated that the concept works. Now you just need to adapt it slightly, mold it, and bring it to a localized audience, which is what we're focusing our attention on.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And so Secret Sales obviously came from there being a model in France that you'd seen and you were excited by. So maybe let's talk about you coming out of university. You're young, you're 22 when you start Secret Sales with your brother. How old's your brother when you start the company?
So he's a year and 8 months my senior. And so he's 24. He also went to Manchester Business School. So we were both in Manchester at the same time, studying management and marketing, and had a similar circle of friends. And we even worked together, like even during our days in Manchester, we were both involved in a promotional company that organized student events. And so we were doing things, we were working together prior. And the opportunity with Secret Sales came about through a few things, but mainly it was firstly driven by this adoration for shopping discounted sales, right? Like back then, sales on the high street were quite controlled. Like they would only be on Boxing Day. That's literally when they would start, and they would serve over the course of Christmas, and then they would end. Whereas now, post Brexit and post COVID and everything else, like sales are just on all the time. Whereas back then, Boxing Day, Selfridges, my family and I would be queuing up outside Selfridges, and we'd be running around like headless chickens, grabbing products and trying to buy what we could. And that experience actually was really enjoyable for us. But when you think about it intrinsically, like running around, like almost fighting, like my family members would literally be pulling, you can imagine this comedy sketch, like pulling an item of clothing, this other person wanting it. That's what happened. And if you think about that as an experience, it's not great. So what we were trying to do was readapt that and bring that concept online through the form of flash sales. And the company that inspired us originated in Paris. They were doing extremely well. My father's experience with Pepe taught me that inventory within businesses was a problem. And you don't really want to be holding on to too much stock. You don't really want to be holding on to any stock if you can help it. And what this model allowed us to do was two things. One, we could create this flash sales model through a digital form, giving customers access to discounted products, albeit through time-limited sales. But at the same time, for a brand who's working with us on the other side, they could sell inventory to a very private, discreet audience over a short period of time without causing any detriment to their brand name or positioning. And that's what was quite beautiful, is that we were able to service consumers without having to commit to the product. So the brands would hold the product on our behalf and it would work on consignment. So we would only buy what we had sold. And so we would host a 4 or 5 day sale to a private audience who were the customers that signed up. And then whatever was purchased in that period, we then went back to the brand and say, hey, we bought this, you can send that in to us now. And so the model worked really well. And it was an amazing experience for me. We made a lot of mistakes, but equally had a lot of fun along the way. It was great.
And what were some of the memorable mistakes? Because one of the things I really want to do with this show is to showcase not just the success stories, of which we
Sure.
need to celebrate, but there's a lot that goes in along the way and a lot of points where it feels like it's all going to come apart.
Yeah. By the way, we made a lot of mistakes. It wasn't one thing or another. We did so many things badly. One of the things that I think I regret the most back in the early days was I realized I was really young. I realized I had a very little experience. And my brother and I were very big advocates of surrounding ourselves with people who were just super smart, like really intelligent, and driving the business decisions with them and not via us. And we were very collaborative in our management style. I think that one of the mistakes I made was not believing in my opinions as much as I should have. I was too collaborative, and I felt I haven't got the experience yet, so I shouldn't be too hard with my opinion. And the challenge, I think, what happened was is that I think I relinquished responsibility a bit too much, which then led to certain decisions being made, which I didn't agree with, but didn't fight. And actually, it turned out that my view was probably right back then, and I should have been more, vocal and more opinionated about certain things. And I feel like I relied on people too much, right? I didn't micromanage anyone, and I'm not a micromanager, but I did just assume that these people were like significantly more experienced and wiser than me, and so therefore knew what they were doing. And in some cases that wasn't the case, right? Like it was just things would happen and I would think to myself, you saw that happening, or your initial view was not to do that, so why didn't you be vocal about it? And so I feel like now where I am in my career is that I'm being really, I'm not, it's not about being opinionated and controlling alone. It's about just vocaling, or at least making people aware that these are my views and sharing them, and not, biting my tongue.
It's so interesting because obviously listening to you now as a founder, you come across as incredibly confident and incredibly sure of yourself. It's hard to picture you being unvocal and you not feeling like your opinion has enough merit.
Yeah, you know what? I have to be honest. Like I was told in the early days of because okay, so in the first couple of years of me starting Secret Sales, it was all personally funded. We were doing everything ourselves. We then closed an investment round from a German group who were also scaling in the same space as us, but in Germany. And landscape conditions allowed them to get to 80 million in year two, where we were like on 7 or 8. And they were then acquired by eBay, which meant that we were semi-acquired by eBay. And during this process, suddenly we went from being quite unstructured and scrappy to being really governed correctly. You've got eBay on your board and you've got to do things. You've got to minute everything properly. You've got to live and breathe by the responsibilities that you have as a shareholder, and do everything. And that was great because actually it was from a learning curve. That was good. But one of the things that I just felt really poor with was I didn't want to speak out of place, right? And I didn't want to say things that I didn't really understand. I had no idea what I was talking about. I was still like 23 at the time, right? So I felt like I knew how to, I knew how to buy and sell. I knew what product looked good because I was quite good at defining and identifying things that I think looked good and that people wanted to buy. I had an idea as to how marketing needed to work, but really didn't know. And I had no idea how to manage investors, particularly big investors like eBay, who were just absolutely like, in terms of our size, a behemoth. And my chairman said to me at the time, he said, Sach, don't speak unless you're spoken to. And I felt like, okay. And so for that reason, I decided, I feel bad saying this, but I think I felt a little, and I look back now with this partly driving that, but I felt a little bit suppressed. I should have been allowed to just be myself and be open and be vocal. And I feel like that I was conditioned into not thinking that was okay, and to try and do things completely by the book and to be black and white. And I don't think they need to be. Now where I am in my career, I'm a really big fan of authentic leadership, being you, behaving like you, speaking like you, and you can speak however you want, right? Like no one's saying that you have to shout profanity every 2 minutes, but you should equally be allowed to just not be shy, to be who you are. And I feel like, I think for many years, I wasn't trying to be someone else, but my brother, my elder brother, it's funny because he's super high academic and he speaks like a politician. And I remember in the early days of Secret Sales, I remember seeing him at the board and being like, God, I just want to talk like he does. But it wasn't natural for me. I couldn't talk like that because his education was very similar to mine, but his personality was very different. And for many years, I was trying to be my brother. I idolized him and I tried to just do what he did. And it was so many years later, I realized, I was like, I don't know why I'm trying to do that. Just like, you need to just be you. And I think that partly drove the feeling I had, right, of not feeling confident enough to just be vocal about certain views and opinions.
It's so true, though. I think so many of us can think of at least one person. I can think of several who I've really admired and thought, okay, then if I want to be good, I need to mirror what their good looks like.
Mm.
And I still remember coming out of a workshop I'd run, and my mentor was a guy you know very well called Jordan, and he has a very clear style to him. He is incredibly confident, and his confidence manifests in quite characteristic ways. And I came out of this workshop, and someone who knows him very well said, I can tell you're taught by Jordan, but I can't quite tell how you do it. And I said, oh, I just did it. And they said, I can tell you're taught by Jordan. And I was trying to copy it. And again, it's so interesting. I think even if it's not your brother, I think so many founders still have an idea of what an entrepreneur should look like. We
Mm.
interviewed someone, last week, and she was talking about how it took ages to call herself a founder because she just didn't.
Feel
She,
confident enough.
yeah, and it's so interesting to hear from you because again, poor assumption from me, but I wouldn't have guessed that would have been a challenge for you early in your career at all.
Yeah. The thing is that I was academically very bright and I have been my whole life. I was, however, going through a period in my teens where I could very easily get a B or an A and I would just do the bare minimum to get that. I never really pushed myself that far because I just felt like I wasn't doing it for me. And it wasn't until I got to university when I realized that I'm working for myself that I started to excel. I took responsibility and I started to really work for the first time in my life, like really work hard. And I got into uni and I got into UMIST, which was at the time a top university. So it wasn't like I didn't work, but I definitely I could have done or been that student that came out with distinction or came out with whatever. And I think I was lazy. Like, I think every parent student evening with my parents would come back being like, you know what, it wasn't bad, but they always were like, Sachin, you could do so much more. And I was just like, yeah, I know. And I don't know what it was. I feel over the years, having been brought up in a really strict upbringing, sometimes you just work because you're told to work and you lose the passion for it. You don't do it because you really want to do it. You're doing it because you're told to do it night and day. And I don't think there's much enjoyment in that. And I think what's really important as a founder and as anyone being involved in a business, you need to absolutely love it. You need to really enjoy it and you need to live and breathe it. And all of the businesses that I'm involved in, like whether it's Secret Sales or the new business 7879, like I am thinking about this business every single moment of the day. And there isn't a 9 to 5. I'm working 15-hour days. I'm working on the weekends. I don't think I've taken a day off work or in forever, right? It just doesn't happen. I can go on holiday, but I'm still thinking about work. I haven't gone on my honeymoon yet, but I'm absolutely sure that my missus will tell me not to look at my phone. And I'm pretty sure that I'm going to end up having to look at it because it is just what it is. And I think there's nothing wrong in that, right? I think that's what it is, that during my earlier years, I wasn't doing it for me and I didn't love it. And now working as a CEO founder, I adore it, right? It's not about making money. I just love the concept of building a business and doing it for you and not doing it for anyone else.
And so coming back to the impact of having suddenly eBay on your board, essentially, and you talked about this is a business that you're doing because you love it and you're learning a huge amount on the job, and suddenly this does cap your own personality in a way, on the board at least. What are your learnings from that in terms of how important you think who's on your board is, how you raise investment? What would you do differently in that case? Because obviously it's tricky because you didn't know eBay were going to acquire the company that invested in you. So it wasn't as clear cut as
No.
accepting or not accepting them onto your board.
Yeah, it was actually it was forced upon us. Like we had a dragon tag right within our arrangement with our acquirer, which meant that we could have scuppered the deal. And it was a £200 million deal. So like we had been not acquired, we had been invested in, and it was a minority stake. And then within the space of 8 months, they had been acquired by eBay. It was just one deal that led into the next. And then within the space of a year, we're sitting with eBay on our cap table without having had much control or say. And at the time we felt like, okay, this is going to be great. But then you realize after a short period of time that actually having such a big business sitting beside you is not, when you're that small. Like we were trading at we were less than 12 million at the time, maybe less than 15 million. It wasn't like massive numbers. And when you've got such a big business beside you, actually, they're not going to support you, right? You're not interesting to them. They have a commercial interest, and if you do well, they do well, but they're not really going to go out of their way to support you. And they didn't. And that actually worked out really badly for us. We had to find a way to reduce eBay's equity holding down because no other shareholder or investor wanted to get involved in our business with eBay holding, if I remember at the time, something like 35 or 40% of the company. And it was through various means that we were able to find a way to get them down and bring a syndicate of VCs in. Now I would be very selective over the types of investors I would want to work with, and really grateful for the investors that we're speaking to at 7879. Back then, I didn't really know how to select, and all I thought was that they would select us. For me, it was about cash. Needed the money, and the money came first. And if someone was willing to give me the money, I would have found a way to just cope with them. And we were fortunate, actually. We had some really good investors, right? We had leading tier one VCs that were on our board, including Partech Ventures and Pentech, the Sanofi Group. We had Connect Ventures, we had Doughty Hanson. And some of these guys were like, they're really successful, really big, very smart. And I think that what I didn't do very well, and the mistake that I made, is I didn't manage the investors as well as I should have. But again, I think that comes down to inexperience. And I think that comes down to not feeling confident enough in myself to manage them, actually. I think, again, I was like, these guys are massive VCs. They've sold businesses for hundreds of millions of pounds. They're going to tell me what to do. I was like, they're obviously much smarter than me, so I'm just going to take their lead. Wrong thing to do, man. Never, ever let that happen. Like, to any entrepreneur listening, it doesn't matter who your investors are. Like, if it's your business and you feel strongly about something, you need to be vocal about that. And don't just assume that your VCs, just because you've got them, are going to get you there. They'll definitely help and open doors. It's important that whoever's leading the business continues to drive the business. And I think I took my foot off the gas a little bit, assuming that everyone around me would help drive. And maybe that's, not fair. But I guess it's a little bit about as to how I feel right now. But I definitely assumed that the experience around the table would have led to better decisions along the way. And I'm just not sure whether that was the case.
It's so interesting. I heard it summarized really the other day, and I can't give credit because I can't remember who said it, but they said if you've got a VC on board, they've got a portfolio of startups, you're one in maybe 20. If you're lucky, you're a bet for them. But if you're
Yeah.
the founder, this is all you have. This is
Yeah.
your bet. And actually, you can't afford to let someone else take those bets for you. You can be informed by them and guided by them where you value their advice and opinion. But as you say, they can't be the ones to drive it.
No, and you're right. VCs or any investor are spreading their investment and aren't hugely reliant on just any one thing working, which is why it's a portfolio. Every individual that decides to invest in different things will see that there are different yields subject to what they put their money into. And I think it took me a while to realize that, right? Even back then, I didn't know. I thought like we were working with investors and great. And I didn't understand how they worked. I didn't know the cycles. I didn't understand the probabilities. I didn't understand much. But I think sometimes not knowing that and not putting yourself under pressure also can help. Like, we were just like, so failure is not an option. We're just going to make this work. So through thick or thin, we were super tenacious as a team. I have to be honest. Like, looking back, we worked hard. We weren't shy to just do whatever it took. And some things we probably could have worked smarter towards and at, but it's all part of the experience, I think, as to building you as an individual and as a leader.
And so you managed to get eBay down to a point where you can carry on the business, you can get other investors, and you're still growing. At some point, you get an offer to sell. You sold the company. I think you actually had two offers. One you had right from Groupon, and then you had the offer from private equity.
Yeah. So we had, you know what, I look back and my brother and I laugh at this, but we were so arrogant in our stance when talking to Groupon because we were just doing really well. We were just like, we were flying. Business was like trading at 70% year on year. We felt like we were about to take over the world. We were doing we were at 35 million in sales at this point, 150 staff. Everything was beautiful, winning awards. We were on TV, being interviewed on the news. Everything was just like, it was almost like a dream. This is 2014, 13, something like that. And we just didn't take it serious enough, right? And we were just like, oh, you know what, it's a good offer, but it wasn't entertained on our side. And I regret it, actually, because it was a really good deal. And the equity component that my brother and I had was strong.
Yeah.
Later, we were down the route of, 2015. I had 5 VCs, 3 of which had voting rights, 2 of whom were 9 years in on a 10-year fund. So they were like, okay, we love you guys, love the business, but hey, we need to find a way to find liquidity and pull our money out because we're opening up our next fund. And so we need to wrap this one up. And I had a minority stake at this point. So like with all the push in the world, it was never going to happen. We started the process, 16 process started, everything was great. And we were building up momentum, and then all of a sudden, unexpectedly, Brexit happened. And that was a huge disaster. A process that should have taken 6 months ended up taking more than 12. Because post-Brexit, there were further negotiations. People started to become quite hard around negotiations and were not willing to take as many risks. A bunch of people immediately pulled off the table because they were like, we just can't invest in a UK business right now because too much ambiguity. We need to let the dust settle. Conversations around recapitalizing the business and continuing for a few years just weren't an option, despite everything that we tried. And the business eventually was sold to PE, which again, could have been fantastic, right? And the plan with the PE company that they already owned another sort of I wouldn't say exactly the same, but it was a similar model, for transparency. They were called Voucher. And the idea with the PE company was let's smash the back ends together and let's create one huge, like shopping club almost, where you have one platform that services the really high affluent consumers with the high brands, the luxury brands. And then you've got, Voucher, which tends to be a little bit more experiential, bit more like spa days and things like that. And
Groupon, in fact.
a little bit more like Groupon, exactly. And the idea was they were trading, we were doing around just shy of 50 million. They were doing, I think, I can't remember exactly, but I think they were doing like 100 or 100 and something. And the idea was put the businesses together. You've got 6 million subscribers at Secret Sales. You've got, I think, maybe 10 plus million subscribers at Voucher. You've suddenly got, to any acquirer looking at that business, you've got a huge amount of data. You've got a lot of customers that you can access and learn about. And equally, you've got access to top tier fashion brands and a bunch of other brands that sit within Voucher. And actually, strategically, it made sense for them to buy Secret Sales. And based on that, we were quite excited by it. But what happened was, one of the things that you typically do when you acquire a company, and this is not just PE, so in their defense, this wasn't a set of behaviors, but the first thing you try to do is like streamline, right? You smash the teams together, see which teams can cut out others and or reduce your OPEX. And one of the things that they did in hindsight that was a huge mistake, which frankly, I think we told them, was anyone above a certain pay grade, they pretty much fired, right? It was like, and they made my brother and I do it. I had tears in my eyes and I couldn't actually do it because these people, Secret Sales to me was a family, right? Like I treated everyone like a brother or a sister. I was way too close to my employees at that point. And it was also because I was too young. I didn't realize, I didn't create the boundaries of employee-employer. Everyone was just like my family and I treated them like such. It meant I had some really meaningful relationships, some beautiful people that were with me for 10 years. One of the girls that I made redundant was one of my first employees, was with me for 10 years. She was with me packing boxes in a small little room when I was taking photographs of products. And other people who were with me for 7, 8 years, others for 9 years. And all of a sudden, my brother and I are having to make these people redundant. And it was hard, man. One of the hardest things I've ever had to do. And my relationship with these people, like, evaporated. Like, they don't even talk to me anymore. And it was bad.
And you couldn't do it?
I couldn't do it. I had tears in my eyes. I couldn't do it. It wasn't that I wanted to do it. I couldn't do it. I was emotionally too upset to even talk to them. And when we were telling them, I couldn't even look at them in the face. My brother was reading something from a piece of paper and I just looked at the table. I couldn't even put my head up. It was that bad for me. And actually it turns out that was the worst thing that could have happened to the company, because everyone that was made redundant was the reason why the company was so successful. Right? We used to speak, my brother and I, about these guys having bleeding green blood, because they were like loyal, right? They did everything for me and my brother, and I would have done anything for them. And they worked like ridiculous hours and anything we needed. And everyone just believed in the business and were just like, we had an amazing culture. Like culture, that saying about culture beats strategy is really true. Like we had an amazing culture, and I'm a big believer in creating the right environment for people to work in. And that's what we did at Secret Sales. But the moment that all these people left, so did the culture, so did the experience. And a business that was meant to go from 50 to 70 million went from 50 to 30 within the space of 8 months. And then who's to blame? Obviously, I'm to blame and my brother's to blame. right? And because we were earning out, and it was bad. Like it was a really bad experience for me. So I ended up finding a way to buy the business back, because for me, my legacy was more important than the money. And my brother was at that point a bit burnt out, but I convinced him that this was the right thing to do. And we ended up acquiring the business within 12 months of us selling it. And then realizing that actually all of the people that were fired were the people I needed to fix the company. Like the company now was a damage. It was like a broken baby, right? It was like, it wasn't working. If you imagine a car engine, and suddenly you've got pistons misfiring, or you've got things not working, and the only way you can fix it is by replacing these pistons and putting in the right components. The people that we made redundant were the people that were needed for this business, but they were never going to come back and work for me. Right? They just they weren't even talking to me, and I was too embarrassed to talk to them. So it was really bad. And then wrote off a lot of the money that we were potentially due and various other bits around that. And then we recapitalized the business with £2 million. We brought on another partner who was amazing and supported my brother and I in that. But we realized quite quickly, within the space of 8 months of buying it back, that we had a problem child, and this business was again burning £250,000 a month. And £2 million, when you put into a business that's burning £250,000 a month, is not a lot of money. And so we realized that we needed to do something about it. And it was just by coincidence that we had two individuals who were previously at a company called Anatwine, Chris Griffin and Matthew Pert, who, came and knocked on our door and said, look, we're really interested in buying Secret Sales, and would you be interested? Deep down, we were like, no, we're not. I think we responded with a decline. No, we're not for sale. But obviously my brother and I were like, this has to get over the line because we don't have enough money to manage this. And so for me, selling the business for the second time was perhaps better described as an elegant dismount rather than a sale, whereby business was, and rolling over of equity and that type of thing allowed me to have further upside, but without having to, recapitalize myself or find other investors. And this was like, now you're thinking about 12, 13 years running this business. Like I was like, my brain and my energy levels were like, I still believed in the business, but I knew that I couldn't do it without my old team. That wasn't going to happen. And I just didn't have, my brother was burnt out entirely. Like he was just like, this is not, I think he was looking at things differently for a long time. And he's definitely more prudent in his approach to life, less of a natural entrepreneur and more of like, he's an incredible leader. He's very sensible and very mindful and considerate and just doesn't take a lot of risks. And I think he had checked out Secret Sales at the point that we had made our first sale, and I had to convince him to buy it back and to go through all of that. And whether or not he regrets it is not the point. I think it was the right thing to do. And the business is still there. And that's what's important to me, right? Secret Sales is still trading. They've recently raised £10 million on a £40 million valuation. And there is still an interest that we have within the business that allows us to want that business to be successful, right? And I want to tell my grandkids that was me that started. That's more important to me than taking £20 million home, right? Like that for me is a really nice feeling. And so I don't regret it, but if it wasn't for certain actions or opportunities that presented themselves, like we would have been in a very different situation. Like we would have had to shut that company down because we wouldn't have been able to capitalize it. Like we couldn't put another few £1 million in, right? It just wasn't going to happen. It turns out it worked out okay.
But it's brutal to hear because you can hear in your voice, as you say, this is so meaningful to you. This is your legacy. And having to, as you say, do an elegant dismount, like it's a really hard thing to have to do. And I can't imagine the emotional toll of having to fire your team of 10 years.
Yeah, that, as I said, was the worst thing that I think I've ever done. And I'm never doing that again. I'm never, ever doing that again. And I'm not going to allow myself to be in that position. The elegant dismount wasn't that emotional for me. It was the right decision and was the right thing for the business. And we had fresh energy, fresh minds, smart people. I was excited about what the future held for the business, and I didn't need to be managing it or running it. And so that was really quite nice, actually. That parting was quite nice for me. And the main shareholder of that business is still a really stand-up individual. And I still speak to him a lot, and I've got a lot of time for them. I will always do what I can to support that business. But it was that first, selling the company to private equity wasn't a bad decision. Firing the staff was the bad decision, but that wasn't from us. And then making me do it was awful. It's normal, right? You get big companies coming in thinking that they can do this or certain things can happen, and they're not close enough to it. It's a different business with different relationships, with different skill sets. You can't just assume that one team can do, and that's why a lot of M&A doesn't work, particularly mergers, right? Acquisitions are a little bit easier because you can just do what you want. But even then, certain acquisitions are bought up and then suddenly just disposed of because they're like, oh, well, it hasn't worked. Mergers are the worst because when you're merging two companies of equal size, that's when you've got cultural issues. You don't know which cultural values to accept, which teams to make redundant. You have to make changes in the team. Otherwise, merging the businesses doesn't make any sense, right? Because how do you make the most of, the combined revenues without making the most of the combined operational expenditure and trying to exploit that slightly? So it'd be the first thing that I did if I was acquiring a business, would look at what teams I could cut out. And so I don't blame anyone for doing that. I blame myself for not being more vocal that we needed these people. And that was another really good example of perhaps me. I could have pushed back and said, look, do not do this because the company will fall. And I don't know what I thought. I thought, well, it's not my company anymore, so let them do what they want. I don't know what I thought, but it was bad.
So lots of lessons learned around, obviously, the investment piece and selling. Were there any other lessons that you learned from Secret Sales that you've taken, as you say, a lot of lessons? Are there any other standout lessons that you've taken from the business into your latest venture, 7879? And we're going to go into 7879 in more depth in a minute.
I think I'm a very different leader now. And I think I needed to go through certain experiences in my life to get me here. I'm very focused now more than I ever have or have been. And I'm also in the detail more than I've ever been. And this goes back to the point of just letting people get on with things and assuming that things are being done to the highest level. It's not to say that I want to micromanage, but currently I'm also not just letting people, everyone in the team right now is doing an incredible job and I'm very proud of everyone. But I am in the detail of everything and everyone. And that's the only way that I want this to be now. And I think that was the biggest mistake that I probably made before. But also, I say the biggest mistake, but I don't think I could have changed it looking back, because I don't think I knew what I needed to happen. Now I've got 10 years worth of, deploying marketing money. We were spending £2 million a year on average at Secret Sales. And we were spending a lot of that on digital, above the line TV. We did some radio. I've got a lot of experience in all of that now. Whereas I needed to go through that to understand what CAC I needed, what CPC I needed, what conversion rate I needed, how the repeat purchase rates were going to have an impact, the lifetime value of a customer and the building of cohorts and things like that. I didn't know the intrinsic detail of that. The marketing people, for example, that I hired, I assumed they knew that, and a lot of them did, but they were also quite fluffy. Whereas now, when it comes to our marketing, I'm just not hiring a marketing director because I'm doing that myself. Right? I'm going to do that, and I'm going to be in the detail of it. And if anyone is to blame, it's going to be me.
And so let's talk about 7879. So this is your latest venture. So can you tell us where the idea came from, a little bit about the business model? Because it's a really interesting business model. I'm very excited by the business model.
So 7879 was born at the height of COVID, where every other investment commodity was plummeting. And when you looked at gold and other precious metals, all of a sudden you've got these investment opportunities like shooting to the skies. And when you think about, as a layman, where you put your money, most people would put their money into property. But post-Brexit, property hasn't provided the yield that a lot of people would see. You then stumbled across NFTs and crypto, and a lot of people put their money into crypto, but they put their money on the way up. And then all of a sudden they've lost a lot of money, because once the mums and dads are putting money into crypto, that's definitely the time to be pulling your money out. And now you've got this, NFTs. And I am not discouraging anyone from putting money into anything like that, because I think crypto and NFTs are a great way to make money. I know some people that have made a huge amount of money, but I also know a lot of people that have lost a lot of money. And what 7879 is all about is encouraging people to invest in the safest commodity that exists in this whole world. Humans have traded gold and other precious metals since the beginning of time, for 5,000 years or more. This is literally the only thing that stands the length of time, right? There's no trend. There's no passing of periods. This is now, has been, and will be forever. And the other thing, is that gold and platinum is not from Earth, right? A lot of people say, if I ask you, where's gold from? Where's platinum from? A lot of people will be like, oh, it's from deep down. It's made in the earth. Right? It's not. Earth did not make platinum or gold. Both those precious metals landed on Earth in a colossal meteor shower about 4 billion years ago. And that makes both of those metals finite and makes them precious. So they don't tarnish. They don't erode, they're not abrasive, and in their purest form, they're antimicrobial and hypoallergenic, which means that they don't react to skin or to anything like that. And so what we've created is a business that actually allows you as an individual to invest into gold and platinum, albeit in the form of jewelry. So what you're buying into is investment bullion. So rather than buying a brick of gold or buying shares in one of those precious metals that you never see and you end up just like receiving a certificate, you're doing exactly the same thing. You're investing into precious metal, but you're going to receive in return a piece of jewelry made from investment bullion, which means that it is 24 karat in terms of purity or 99.9% platinum. And it also means that it's sold by weight, so by gram, and transparently priced. So you've got a 30% margin instead of the exploitative margins that some of these other brands have. And without naming anyone, because actually, I don't think this is about individual brands. I think this is an industry thing, is that the jewelry industry has been governed by a lot of red tape. And I don't think consumers who are buying into jewelry know a lot about what they're buying. And so what we've created is a bit of an education, right? So as a customer, you're able to understand that 18 karat gold is 25% impure. 14 karat gold is 42% impure. So anything that you're buying from a brand isn't holding a lot of intrinsic value. You've got brand equity and that will always retain. But when it comes to reselling, when it comes to like potentially putting that on a secondhand market, it's a buyer's market. It's an eBay market, right? It's not governed by an international bullion market, for instance. Whereas our jewelry can be bought and sold back on our platform. So you buy it at the price of gold or platinum, which is governed in real time by the bullion market, which means that our prices are dynamic. They're changing by second. And then you've got a transparent 30% fee. Interestingly, there's no VAT on the gold because it's bullion. So it's not 30% plus 20%. And comparatively with the big brands, you would have the cost of diluted metal plus a 900% markup plus then VAT on top of that. So what you're buying is like as close to the spot price as possible. You're able to then track the value of your jewelry in real time based on its weight. So there's a portfolio that we built and designed, which sits within the website. So you can actually see, like stocks and shares, a graph showing you how your jewelry has performed. And at any point in time, we offer a guaranteed buyback mechanism. So you can just say, right, you know what? I've just made 30% on my earrings. I'm just going to, I want liquidity now. I'm going to sell it back. Or you don't have to, there's no obligation. But the idea is that you can trade up, you can sell back if you decide that you, I don't know, like this, there's a marketing stunt in here somewhere. But if you decide that you don't want to be married anymore, you can sell us your ring back. And so the idea is that there is upside for you. And like your property, if you buy property, you would expect your property to make you money. Why should your jewelry not make you money? Why should your jewelry that you buy just sit in your wardrobe and not do anything for you? And I think bringing this back to what humans have been doing since the beginning of time, where you wear your wealth, this is what 7879 is all about. And we're the only company in this part of the world to be doing that. And we're very excited about what the future holds.
And as you said, actually, this is a tradition that's been happening in different parts of the world. It's just not, very Western way of consuming jewelry, but it is a tradition that's been happening in other parts of the world. So we know that people actually see value in buying a piece of jewelry, gifting something that's going to hold its value and grow in value. We have a lot of like wedding jewelry in Asia, for instance, that's actually done as a gift because it's going to accrue value. And so I think really interesting around the investment angle. And then, as you say, also the transparency, which is so new in this market and so exciting. I think whenever you see an industry where you have markups of hundreds of percent, there's something to be done right.
It offers you the opportunity to actually make money from the jewelry that you're wearing, right? And slightly differently from the Indian families and the Asian families that buy 22 karat gold, like Indian jewelry. I didn't know until I started 7879 that Indian jewelry was not 24 karat, 22 karat. Indian jewelry has impurities in it. Yet Indians and many other Asians are buying jewelry at the price of gold plus the markup that whoever is selling to them gives them because it's very discretionary. And what they don't know is that it's being weighed. So the price of gold is £48 a gram and there's X many grams. So that's what they're paying plus a 50 or 60 or 70% labor charge. But what they're getting is actually the spot price minus 10 or 20 or 30% because actually what's in the gold is not actually worth what they're paying for it. So they've got one margin on one side, then another margin on the other side, which they're perhaps being exploited on. Again, it just feels like this is such a simple way for people to be thinking about buying jewelry. And for those people that have met us in Selfridges, we had an incredible experience selling in Selfridges as part of their new concept, which was labeled Shopping the Future. And they had selected a handful of brands who were all focused around being innovative and disruptive. And we were the best-selling brand in that whole space, like by a long way. And we were so happy. And it was an incredible experience for us. But us talking to customers about all of this stuff that we're doing, the look on their faces, there was a light bulb moment for a lot of people. The transparent pricing was the biggest like aha moment. And then
Yeah.
showing them the portfolio, that at that point, people are just like, right, you know what, I'm buying right now, or I'm taking your details and I'm going to buy later. And it was just an amazing thing.
And it's so interesting from a business model perspective. You're stepping back from the consumer side. Often, what I tell founders is you need to build more value for customers over time to keep them locked in and retained. And it's one of the challenges that direct to consumer brands are having. Is typically they're doing it around community at the moment, which works better than the old model, which was just keep paying more to acquire more people as you burn through them. But really interesting, I think, with you is you've got this relationship through the portfolio. So actually, you have this genuine value add over time. It's not just extractive lock-in. It's genuinely like the customer's having a good experience because they can see, as you said, it's almost a little bit gamified, but you can see your investment portfolio and you can actually feel good about a purchase that you can also genuinely enjoy every day. And I think that's really interesting when you think about the value proposition to customers strengthening over time. And also, as you say, that buyback, so you can unlock the value, because without that, it's a bit moot. Really interesting. So how did you, from a business model perspective, how did you go about testing some of the core risks in the model?
So what we did first and foremost is we built two brands which were not related by name or by virtue. And we created websites on Squarespace, so like really simple websites that allowed us to gather a bit of information. And the first thing was, one was driven on investment jewelry. The other one was built around transparent pricing. We then tested certain value propositions and marketing messages through social channels and drove customers towards these websites, where we would then understand whether these customers were interested in either one of those two value props, but then what pricing they were interested in. And then the third page they would look at would be please enter your email address here and we'll be able to email you once things go live. And so we were able to gather a huge amount of data from a marketing perspective on what interested them, right? And what would actually get people clicking on certain adverts. We also were able to gather data on what was selling really well with some of these other bigger brands. What designs, what styles, what categories, what price points. And we then designed our range based on the best sellers of other brands. Like we were not, none of this was intuitive. Like we didn't put a finger in the air, like, oh, I like that design or I like that ring. We made, and we will continue to make our designs based on data. So we know that the rings that we've designed are already really popular with other brands, or we've designed our own versions of. So there's no infringement upon trademark or design or anything like that. And we've been able to hit the ground running, right? So the business had probably around 8 months worth of research and data collection before we even went live. And so when we did start trading in November, being our first month of trade, we did £20,000 worth of sales in that first month. We're now on month 6. And we're doing, I'm not even sure if I should be saying this, but we're doing £130,000 already. That's like this month, April, and we're now in May, but the month of April will put us on more than a £1.5 million run rate for the year. So it's literally, and the only way that we can demonstrate that level of trajectory is by having had that data. Like we didn't start on day one starting to test at that point. What was really important to us was to remain nimble, to test and learn, to gather the data, and to incorporate as much of that as possible. And same thing at Secret Sales was that we made a lot of our decisions based on data, even our buying decisions. So when it came to purchasing inventory, I had a merchandising team that would give me granular information about what t-shirts were selling in what style and in what color and what jeans and what sizes and in what length. And we would then buy based on what people were purchasing already. And so what I'm doing now with 7879 is we've got 6 months worth of data. I'm now putting together a propensity model, which is going to allow us to be a little bit more predictive around what we should be buying and when. So we're trying to look forward over the next 12 months. Obviously, buying pure gold and pure platinum can be quite weighty in terms of its cost. And so we're trying to be really smart with it. There is one pendant called a bullion bar pendant, which is essentially a bullion bar that sits on your necklace. We've just sold 50 of them in the space of 3 weeks, right? And it's just, we know that this is absolutely flying. And we're looking at traffic conditions, and then we're looking at conversion rates per SKU, and we're then going to be optimizing our purchase orders based on that. So moving forward, we're just going to build a predictive model that allows us to make informed decisions as to what should be coming into the business and when.
I remember sitting down with you really early on, and you saying, I see this in Selfridges. And then when I saw it was coming in Selfridges, I thought, of course it is. Sach said it was. So
Yeah.
tell me, like, how did that come about?
I think manifestation is a really big thing, right? And I'm a big believer in that, by the way. I am a massive advocate of really visualizing what you want to happen and then just believing it will happen, and then, you know, allowing your subconscious and the universe to make it be. But the reality is that I'm fortunate enough to be privy to certain inner circles within the fashion industry. And I still attend certain private dinners with the leading CEOs and directors of all of the leading retailing groups. And so I was at an inner circle dinner. I'm not even allowed to mention the name because it's like one of these, it's just one of these private dinners. And there was one of the directors of Selfridges, and I actually pitched 7879 to him over dinner. And I was like, I'm taking the opportunity right now. I'm just going to just pitch it to you in front of everyone. This is what we're doing. And I'm desperate to be in your store. And he just loved it because it ticks all the boxes for them. And I think when we went into Selfridges, we didn't know anything about this shopping the future concept that they have. And they're very forward and they're very innovative in their approach to things. But they love the fact that we're using recycled metal. They love the fact that there was an investment angle. They loved even more that we were transparently priced. And all of our values are totally aligned with all of their values. And so they immediately put us into this little space, into the concept area within Selfridges. Frustratingly, we were not well positioned. And so I was quite angry with them at the time. And it just turns out after the course of 3.5 weeks that we're by far the best selling brand in that space. And I wasn't surprised we were the best selling brand because I was there every single day. My co-founder was there every single day. And we were selling as hard as we could. Like we were just grafting, and I would do 8 hours in the morning on email and then 8 hours in store. And he would do 8 hours in the morning in store and then go back on and do his email in the afternoon. And we were just like relentless with it. And I don't think any other brand owner and there was some startups there as well, right? But I don't think anyone else were as committed as we were. So I'm not surprised at the result. And now we're in conversations about potentially having a more permanent space within Selfridges as a concession. So we're negotiating that at the moment. There are other department stores in London, one beginning with an H, who we're talking to as well. So we're just trying to see what is best suited for who we are and where we want to be moving forward.
And you've done some other kind of marketing and publicity stunts. You have, if anyone wants to check out the Instagram page, there is a rather infamous car. You may also see it if you're driving around London. You have a very gold car. So what else have you been doing to try and get 7879 as a brand out there?
So I think when it comes to building a direct consumer brand, right, particularly one that's selling something like jewelry, you want it to be cool, right? It's not just about buying jewelry. It's about buying into the lifestyle. It's about buying into people who are wearing it. It's about trying to be like the people who are wearing it, right? It's very aspirational. And, you know, what we're doing, the first things first is that we wrapped a car in metallic gold, which sounds awful. And to a lot of people is awful. But for the brand is absolutely amazing, because what's happening is that this car is being photographed all day, every day. And it's then subsequently being shared on Instagram all day, every day. It's doing an amazing job for us. And naturally, the car is branded across the sides and across the rear and on the front. So it's not like there's anyone getting away from it. What the plans moving forward is focus our attention on conversion and raising awareness, but we want to do that efficiently. So we don't want to just start spending money for the sake of spending money. We are going to work with influencers. We have done already, but we're going to work with influencers who are impactful and who fit with the values of our brand and for what we stand for. There's a relationship that we're trying to incorporate within the music industry. So we want to try and have certain people who we know or who may be interested in wearing jewelry like this wear within their music videos and within other aspects like that. So there are already conversations. There's already a music video that has of jewelry being worn in it. And we're just trying to be a little bit more focused towards trying to continue to build on this aspirational side of 7879. And I'm definitely not saying that we're where we want to be, but we're trying. We're going to make a lot of mistakes along the way. We don't know for sure whether what we do is going to work, but we're going to give it our best go. And so far, it seems to be making the right noise. Let's see what happens over the next 12 months.
And as you say, the great thing is you're getting data constantly. When something's not working, you can change it. Okay, final couple of quick fire questions. So first question, looking for co-founders. So your first co-founder, obviously related to, but what would you advise people to look for in a co-founder? Because obviously you've got Ben now, but you're a CTO and co-founder. What do you think is important to have, maybe on the softer side?
Sure. So I think when I started Secret Sales, my brother was the best person for me to go into business with because, again, something that my father ingrained in us is that money can change people and that your family will always be there and your family should be the only people that you should go into business with. Now that I'm working with someone like Ben, who is absolutely amazing because he, as an individual, is very technically sound and astute at building and as an engineer, like he's just super smart. And I think that I missed that at Secret Sales. My brother and I, neither of us are technical. So we had a CTO, we had product officers, we had a team of 15 engineers and 3 product guys, and we managed it the best we could. But we couldn't take ownership over it because we just didn't know. So we were very reliant on the people that were in the team. What's happened now with Ben is that he is, as a co-founder and as a CTO, he can take ownership. And that means that what we've built at 7879, at least for now, is super robust, right? It's very well executed. It's very well built. I'm very proud of him and of the team. And I just don't think that I would have thought about that. So for anyone now starting a business, depending on what field or whatever industry they're going into, what's really important is that you find a co-founder that completely balances you. So you do not find someone who is similar to you because there is no point having them there, right? You need to find someone who is very different and is going to complement your skill set. That's important. Like my brother and I too were very different in terms of our personality and skill. And so even with Secret Sales, like I did all of the buying and all of the merchandising and all of the creative and everything that was front of house. And my brother did all the marketing, all the tech and all the stuff that was back of house. And we didn't step on each other's toes. And the same with Ben and I. Like Ben is very technically sound. And as I said, is now managing a part of the business that I can't manage because I can manage the roadmap. I can manage how the business operates and what I can also manage what needs to be executed. But in terms of delivery of that, it really needs to come from someone who understands. And I think for where I am right now, I'm very grateful to have someone like Ben because he's really added to me.
Love that. And final question, what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
I think we've touched on this already. A lot of founders who I have met, and it's not uncommon for a founder to just be quite a control freak, wanted to do it all, feel like they're smarter than everyone else, and will only hire people to support them. But actually, the best way to drive a business forward is to hire people who are just excellent, right? It's not about, are they better than me or are they worse than me? If they're not better than you shouldn't be hiring them. They need to be excellent. So everyone should be better than you at whatever it is that you're hiring them for. And I think working collaboratively is important off the back of that, but then not making the mistake I made and just totally relinquishing responsibility. You still need to be involved with what they're doing, but you need to trust that person to just like really go and get it. And if they're not better than you, then you really shouldn't hire them. Like really, it needs to be like the best of the best. And we're doing that at 7879. Like we are hiring an incredible team. I'm very proud of them all. They're all really high achievers and it feels right. It feels like things are moving in the right direction for the right reasons.
Love that piece of advice and good one to set ego aside and hire people who just wow you. Sach, thank you so much for all your time, for sharing so candidly, for some incredible advice. You've been incredible. And if everyone wants to follow you or connect with you, where's the best place for them to find you?
Sure. LinkedIn is just Sach Kukadia, which is SachKukadia. On all the other handles, it's Secret Sach, including Instagram and the other more softer touch points. And would love to connect with anyone. If there's anyone that's got any questions or feels like they want some advice from me or feel like I could help, then feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to get involved.
That's so kind. And definitely give 7879 a look and a follow as well. Very cool business there. Sach, thank you so much.
Thanks, Hattie. Lovely to see you.
That's it for this episode. It's been a pleasure recording it for you, and we hope you love it. If you do, please do take a moment to give us a few stars or 5 on your podcast app of choice, so lots of other founders can find us too. And for those of you curious what I get up to when not interviewing founders for this show, I have a new startup, If We Raise, aiming to get expertise and capital to underrepresented founders earlier. You can follow what my co-founder Tim and I are up to via @IfWeRaiseTogether on Instagram or @IfWeRaise on LinkedIn and Twitter. We'll be sharing our lessons learned along the way, as well as highlighting the incredible founders and angel investors joining the If We Raise journey.